Hey there. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to this webcast. My name is Jonathan Foust, and I'm here to lead a short meditation and introduce the talk, part of this ongoing series on the 10 perfections. And also want to just, before we begin, say hello to Nikki, who is 6 months old right now, and here to join us for the meditation. Is that right? Okay. You just settle down there. Yeah, right like that. Okay. A couple announcements before we begin. Thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for supporting this, streaming this, to our producer, Glenn Harrison, for making this possible. Shout out as well to our mindful movement leader, Rita Moran. 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can do mindful movement to prepare you and bring you right up to here and now for this meditation and talk. And just to say, we are suspending mindful dialogue for the time being. Ray is in his recovery process. Send him lots of love. He's actually doing really, really great. I just so admire him and how he and Tara are working this issue in their life. I've got a newsletter. I got a newsletter I got to get out. I'm actually working on it now. I offer my best photography in the last couple months, actually, and a little compendium of talks if you're interested. Then there's a weekly if you're interested in what's coming up, and I share upcoming events and all that kind of stuff. So finally, this is all offered freely, no ads, nothing other than me just reminding you that this is all offered freely, so no one is ever denied access to these teachings, which was kind of supposedly a core teaching from the Buddha to those who are following him. The teachings are considered priceless, therefore there's no price. If you do feel inspired to support this and the expenses and me, of course, to my lavish lifestyle, thank you so much. Okay, that's it for now. Let's dive into this meditation, and then I will offer a short yet brief yet concise yet not too long introduction to the talk. You might want to reach your arms up overhead. Reach up, stretch up, let out any sounds. Ask your body how your body might like to move, whatever it needs to kind of settle in. And when you have a sense of that, and when you're ready, you can close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, let your attention be drawn inward. In particular, you might give your mind a little job to do. Let's say the first job is, how precisely can you identify where you feel the breath right now on the inside? And as you focus on the sensation of the breath on the inside, you're taking all this awareness and you're bringing it right into here and now. Now, as you feel the breath, you might like to gently lengthen the breath, lengthening it enough where it's pleasurable. And it also has the mind engaged. Some people like to do a ratio of breathing in to the count of 4, exhaling to the count of 4. But you might just play around here. And again, the breath is long and yet pleasurable, so you're not overstraining at all. Now, as you're aware of the breath, you might also explore some ways to bring a sense of more intimacy and connection to the here and now. Feeling all the muscles of the face, and just sense over the next few exhalations, how much more could you soften the muscles of the face and feel your face expressionless? Imagine the face of a marble statue. You might bring your attention into the inside of your mouth. Feel the volume of your tongue, the volume of your lips. And you might sense if you could relax your tongue right now. As you sense the masseter muscles, kind of the chomping, chewing muscles, could you relax those muscles? And let the jaw very slightly just hang from the skull. Could you relax the root of the tongue down into your throat? And as you do so, just track any felt shift. Another powerful way to train your attention is in the arms and the hands, and you might take a moment just to feel the weight of your arms. Arms like heavy drapes hanging from your shoulders. And let your awareness flow down the length of the arms, from the shoulders down through the elbows. The elbows down through the wrists. Feeling the backs of the hands. Feel the palms of the hands. And sense, if you can, the volume of the right thumb, the space inside the right thumb. And the space inside the left thumb. And sense, if you can, the space between each of the fingers on the left and right hand. You might bring your awareness to the belly. Just feel the space between the navel and the spine, and over the next few exhalations, how much more could you soften and relax and thereby feel in the belly? And feeling now the soles of the feet and the heels. If you relax and soften and feel from the inside out, the soles of the feet and the heels, what do you feel? What do you notice? And you might, from this deepening place of relaxation, again, bring your attention back to your breath. How much could you relax here at the point of the breath? Wherever you feel the breath the most predominant, or the breath at the nostrils, the breath in the belly. How much could you soften and feel? And for these next few minutes, when you notice your mind lost in the narrative, planning, reviewing, escort your attention back to the breath. Relax and again, feel what's here. Feel what's present. You might explore now opening into a greater sense of relaxation, sensing perhaps even a quality of effortlessness, just letting things be just as they are. What could soften, relax, or let go right now? Just sensing inside. What could relax or soften inside right now? Sensing the quality of the mind. Is there anything in the attitude of the mind right now that could soften or relax or let go? And as you do so, what do you feel? What do you notice? You might gently now deepen your breath just a little bit. And again, feel the breath on the inside. Notice where you feel the most predominant. Sense what may have shifted for you. And as you're ready, let your body begin to move and stretch. Take some time to begin your transition. And welcome back. Sorry about the restless puppy noises. The following talk is on patience and toleration, which is a real challenge. As you know, when you want something, it's really, really hard to not want to grasp it and get it as quick as you can. But patience is such an important part of practice. It's that quality of steadiness. However, there are near enemies. What looks like patience and looks like tolerance can sometimes be a little bit twisted. So the following talk is all about cultivating this characteristic, not only in your practice, but in your life. I hope you enjoy the following talk. So many blessings. I look forward to being with you again. Take care. An old man is on his deathbed, been bedridden for a long time, and his wife is sitting by the bed. And he shares this with her. He says, I'm just starting to appreciate how difficult I was in this life. I know I've had disappointments and I had a lot of anger issues, and I'm really sorry I took it out on you. I took it out on you all the time. But I'm also reflecting how whenever I would get mad and get angry or judgment or blaming you, you were so calm, so non-reactive. You would just sort of like smile and get up and come back, and then you'd come back and sit with me again. How in the world could you maintain your self-control when I was such a jerk? His wife smiled and she said, well, I had a ritual. Now, when you would kind of unload on me, I would just smile inwardly and I would just get up and leave the room and I would clean the toilet. And her husband said, well, how does getting up and leaving the room and cleaning the toilet help you work with your reactivity? And she smiled gently and she said, well, I used your toothbrush. This talk is on tolerance and patience and forbearance, which is a quality of self-restraint or self-control. This is an ongoing series on what are called the 10 perfections. Again, horrible title. What a setup for self-rejection and perpetually falling short. But nonetheless, I find these teachings really, really helpful. So to date, we explored kind of the power of generosity, of how learning how to give is learning how to be selfless, learning how to move from a tightly bound self to an interdependent self. We explored the quality of virtue or moral conduct, that when you're less selfish, your moral conduct is about living in harmony with others, but also living in harmony with what you want, setting up the riverbanks, if you will, for how you want to focus your attention. And kind of building on cultivating virtue and moral conduct is this beautiful teaching around renunciation, which is really about letting go of what binds you, letting go of what distracts you, letting go from what takes you away from what makes you really, really happy in your life. And when you do that, then there's this natural arising of wisdom and insight. You start to see more clearly into the nature of reality. And in order to do this, you need energy. You need vigor. You need a capacity to persevere. And so we have this beautiful teaching on managing your energy, on virya, on cultivating a personal kind of fearlessness and inspiration to stay on the path, which can be really challenging. And that leads to the exploration now, which is, as you develop that sense of vigor, you also need to cultivate kind of his counterbalance, which is patience and tolerance. It's the capacity to be unaffected by what's happening externally, but also the capacity to meet what arises with equanimity and understanding. There are lots of ways that you can kind of slice and dice this topic of patience, forbearance, and self-restraint, but here's one. Here's kind of what I'd like to explore. It's about sort of training yourself to refrain from hurting those who have hurt you, It's about learning how to cope with whatever suffering you have to endure without necessarily or uselessly fighting it, and to develop confidence in reality, to develop confidence in ultimate truth, if you will. So in 4 parts, I'd like to jump into this: to refrain from hurting those who've hurt you, to explore how you can increase your capacity to endure hardship, how to develop confidence in the ultimate truth, and then I'd like to talk some about what are called the near enemies of tolerance and forbearance. These are the states they look very, very close to it, but they're not it. And so, refraining from hurting those who have hurt you. I went to a boarding school. I was incredibly privileged to go to a boarding school when I was 14. And like in all boarding schools, there was, some hazing. This is a Quaker boarding school, so the hazing was pretty mild. But still, there was a ritual, I think it was like opening weekend, where on your way back from the evening gathering, the seniors would snag the freshmen and give them pink bellies. So a pink belly is where they hold you down and they play the bongos, play the bongos on your belly, and then it turns pink. Oh boy, that was intense. But it was interesting because when I was a senior, there was a number of us had a conversation. It was time for the hazing, and we just thought, this is stupid. Why do we want to put someone through this? And I like to think that our decision not to pass on the tradition of pink bellies might have ended that. The capacity to refrain from harming others, kind of ending that cycle. Of course, we harm ourselves all the time. And it's also part of nature. We're just getting a couple warm days, and I'm thinking about hummingbird feeders and setting them up. And if you have ever spent more than 10 minutes observing hummingbirds, you'll realize pretty quickly that hummingbirds are jerks. They're absolutely awful to each other. It's all about dive bombing and domination and avoiding domination. And I have this opportunity to hang out in nature a lot as I, paddle on the river, and it's the same thing out there. When I watch the great blue herons along the Potomac, it's some small heron's minding its own business, and a bigger heron comes over and claims the rock, and we're not that different as humans. It pretty much comes down to your unconscious energy goes into either dominating others or avoiding domination. And hopefully, if the prefrontal cortex keeps developing, we'll begin to recognize there's more to life than just this sense of domination and control, or avoiding domination and control, and a recognition of our interconnectedness. And if you think about today, how many times did you create a sense of separation from others? How many times did you get annoyed or judge someone? How many times did you feel like someone was trying to dominate you and you came up with a strategy to avoid domination, or maybe you laid it into someone else? How many times today did you move into some form of self-preservation or self-protection? It just happens as we go through life. We're kind of designed for survival, so we're anticipating what could be threatening and then trying to prevent it. There's a great saying in French, l'enfer c'est l'autre. That is to say, hell is other people. Hell is what we create and how we blame others. And in this relational field, we can really see quite clearly the 3 poisons in relationship. We can see how our perception of life is either filtered through a lens of greed, of wanting, or it's colored with a filter of hatred, of aversion or judgment or blame, or there's a flavor of delusion, of just not seeing clearly. And I think my sense is that with all the issues in our culture on the planet right now, with climate change and so forth, that when resources dry up, self-preservation and fear get stronger. We're under threat, and I don't need to list all the ways there is brutality and domination and manipulation of people's fears right now. This sense of fear and oppression are part of human consciousness, and the Buddhist tradition is not in the least bit clear. When we look at Myanmar, a Buddhist country, they make up about, the Rohingya make up about 1 million out of the 50 million people there. They speak a Bengalese dialect, and they're perhaps the most persecuted minority anywhere right now. This sense of fear and intolerance is part of human nature. And we can see the blatant manipulation from the dominant culture in this country right now. And I don't know about you, but it's very easy for me to get angry. When I read the news, part of me just becomes an anarchist. I get filled with rage and frustration. And occasionally I remember these words from the Buddha, that hatred never ceases through hatred in this world. Through love alone it ceases. This is an eternal law. So in developing patience and tolerance, particularly in a stressful time right now on the planet, how do you do it? So, well, according to the Buddhist tradition, there are 5 ways that you can explore removing irritation and annoyance. So this is how it's outlined. 1 is to cultivate a friendly attitude. Let's just say someone's irritating. Is it possible to generate a little bit of friendliness? Sometimes that can be really helpful. Just kind of smile and turn toward that person with a sense of warmth. The second is to explore understanding. Is it possible just to kind of get a sense of what the other person needs, what they're wanting that they're not getting? That whole piece around, how is this person's leg caught in a trap? How are they acting out of fear? Understanding that can help. The third is the sense of onlooking equanimity. That is to say, just a sense of steadiness. Just to kind of see what's there and explore being non-reactive, which kind of leads to the 4th one, which is that you can just ignore the activity. Ignoring is interesting. A lot of training in animals now has, rather than punishing bad behavior, you ignore bad behavior and you reward the positive behavior. In fact, there's this really cool story I read in the New Yorker years ago. This woman who was writing about this training that she and her husband were doing with their dog. And so she thought, I wonder if I can apply this to my husband. So one night he said he was going to do the dishes and he didn't. So she ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day he did the dishes. So she was writing about this, and then she realized that he was doing the same thing to her. So ignoring can be an effective tool. So these 4, cultivating a friendly attitude toward irritation, moving toward understanding, kind of role reversing, a sense of calling on equanimity or just steadiness, non-reactivity, maybe just ignoring, exploring that as a strategy. And the 5th is kind of referred to as ownership of the karma. And here's the line. And again, it's a little antiquated. But here's the line. The worthy person is the owner of her actions, inherits the results of her actions, and is indeed born of her actions. And only she is responsible for her actions, be they good or bad. This is how annoyance with the irksome can be instantly removed. So that is to say, just to be aware that there's a certain action-reaction when you respond. If someone is angry with you and you respond with anger, you're setting in motion a chain of actions. And remembering that there is an action-reaction sometimes can help to help you to sense, is there another way that I can cultivate an outcome that's more wholesome? It takes some patience and mindfulness, and also a tremendous amount of compassion, because when we're not aware, we're just reaction machines. And so this is what we could call relational dharma. Being aware of the pain that we inflict on other people because of our own unprocessed pain. And we all carry that. I always love that line from Carl Jung, who said, there's no greater impact on our environment, and especially on our children, than the unlived lives of the parents. When we react out of suffering and pain, we create suffering and pain. So that's one element of forbearance and endurance. It's trying to find the middle way in a mass of confused and hurt people. It's about developing tolerance for discomfort. And so this really leads to, how do you work with difficulty? How do you find patience when you are undergoing cruelty, when you're experiencing cruelty? I think with the internet bringing so much unconscious actions to the surface these days, it's hard to stay open to the pain that we inflict on each other. The oppression and the indifference of the dominating cultures is so deeply dehumanizing. And you can see, or I can see, the hatred in our own culture, the seeds of civil war kind of ready to sprout. And this intolerance, making anyone different who is different from what I believe, it creates a sense of the other, the enemy. And with that comes depression, sadness, anger. And naturally, we all struggle. And I think sometimes, for myself, like, now is the worst that it's ever been. But then I have to ask myself, is it true? Is it true that there's more suffering now than any other time on the planet? There are those who argue that there's more cooperation now. There are fewer wars happening now. That there are more people in different cultures mutually trying to solve problems. Arguments run on both sides. But nonetheless, suffering is a constant all through human nature, our relationship to suffering. So if you think about the people you know, think about someone you know who's going through a hard time right now and who's struggling. And you think about the times you've been in pain, when you've been depressed. How do you call on the patience and the tolerance to endure that? And this really speaks to the first truth, the first of the Four Noble Truths, that stress and dissatisfaction are part of the human condition. And that it's possible to let go. When I reflect on my own personal suffering in life, I am very clear I've had an unbelievably privileged life. But I do get these migraines, which completely shut me down. At the same time, I have never had a surgery. The last night in the hospital was the night I was born. I've only been on antibiotics maybe once or twice. I've broken bones, but nothing more than just my own stupidity. And I can't imagine what it must be like to be chronically ill, or to be chronically enduring pain that's unrelenting. I don't know how people do it. I've spent some time with people who work with chronic pain and kind of unrelenting suffering, and I so admire their capacity to stay with it. Suffering has a way of breaking down our resistance. And there is the possibility, in its own kind of like awful way, of breaking through into something bigger than you. I know for myself, when I'm kind of racked with pain and I have the capacity to be with it, that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I can sort of break through my pain into the pain, kind of the shared pain that we all have. And yet, even though we're here to cultivate patience in the name of pain, we still get caught in self-preservation. A hospice worker told the story of a 98-year-old woman in hospice who kept crying out, "Why me? Why me?" And this brings into mind, what does it mean to develop more confidence in eternal truth? Like the main goal of this practice is to see into the nature of reality, to see what is true, and then to cultivate your capacity to be with what's here. A story which I've told before, but one I keep coming back to, are these stories of Tibetan monks who were being tortured. And they focused all of their attention on trying to stay alive, so their tormentors would not have to take on the karma of killing another person. How in the world can someone find that inner resource? It's beyond me. But here's what the Buddha says about that. Not giving anger for anger, one wins a double victory. He behaves for the good of both, himself and the other person. Knowing well the other's anger, he is mindful and remains calm. In this way, he is healing both himself and the other person. People who think he's a fool do not understand the Dharma. This speaks to an incredible shift in consciousness. The capacity to really sense the pervasive quality of suffering, to recognize how we all suffer, how we all act out of fear, out of self-preservation, and to hold that with some quality of loving presence and compassion. It's just extraordinary. When we recognize that no matter what side of the political spectrum we are, that perhaps somewhere at the core is a very deep desire to be happy, a deep desire to be free. And so we have in this practice the refuges. Where do you go when you're overwhelmed? I'd like to lead just a short little reflection, if you will, just to touch on these. If you like, you can close your eyes, and you might take 3 slow, deep breaths and just feel the breath on the inside. One of these refuges is awareness itself. The word Buddha means to be aware. And you might just sense in this moment, can you sense this, your capacity for non-judging awareness? The second refuge is referred to as the Dharma. The Dharma can be a path, or in its essence, it means truth. And can you sense in this moment, what do you know to be true right now? And sensing the refuge of Sangha, which in its essence is love. Is it possible to just a sense in this moment to hold your experience in some kind of loving presence, some empathy or compassion or kindness? And just to sense what are sometimes referred to as these three jewels of taking refuge in awareness, taking refuge in truth, and taking refuge in love. So you might, in your own time, deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. As I like to say, when you become more aware, you become more sensitized. That's good news. And it's also challenging news because you begin to sense the suffering in you and around you, all the incredible unskillful means of how we try to soothe our suffering, how we're caught in greed and hatred and delusion. And this quality of patience, calling on patience and tolerance, can be a wonderful antidote. A few words here, again, from the kind of original texts. The characteristic of patience is acceptance, and its function is to endure. And its manifestation is non-opposing tolerance. So to be patient is to begin to sense how things really are. To kind of remove reactivity and to begin to sense a kind of a calm tranquility, despite being provoked, of course. So this goes on to say that patience of the will produces forgiving forbearance. Patience of the intellect produces faith and confidence. Patience of the body produces strength and endurance. Internal tolerance of states cultivates endurance. Tolerance of other beings is forgiveness. And those who protect themselves also protect other beings. So in the midst of suffering, calling on these refuges of wakefulness, of truth, of love, can be so helpful. And yet at the same time, as we are kind of navigating our way through life, it's very easy to find ourselves sort of thinking we're practicing patience and tolerance when we're not. And this speaks to the near enemies. You know, I like to think, and I'm not sure I think it anymore, but I like to think maybe we are evolving as a species. That perhaps the kind of arising of the internet is kind of a mirror of our prefrontal cortex, of understanding different points of view, having access to more information. Maybe not. As we become more aware of the suffering around us, it's also easy to feel overwhelmed and begin to shut down. And this really speaks to the number one, what I think is the number one near enemy of patience and tolerance, particularly when it comes to social justice. And that is complacency. Martin Luther King said that the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by bad people, but the silence by that of the good people. We all have a sense of overwhelm. We just can't take it anymore, and we sort of shut down. And part of that is kind of a healthy form of self-preservation. But another side of it, the other side of it is delusion, taking refuge in delusion, really a false refuge. Here's a reading which I found really quite powerful. Here's the opening part of a report in The Independent. Her neighborhood was bombed by the Allies. The Jews around the corner were being sent to Auschwitz, and the Red Army had launched its final assault on Berlin. But Brigitte Ecke, a teenage German, was unconcerned. She was far more interested in going to the cinema, dancing to gramophone records, and trying to cope with a disastrous perm. The 15-year-old Berlin schoolgirl named Gitti started keeping a diary in December 1942, when the German capital was being bombed nightly and the Nazi Holocaust was killing thousands. As a trainee secretary, she recorded her daily experiences to improve her stenography skills. Now, some 70 years on, her diary has been published for the first time in Germany and is being hailed as a remarkable documentary as to how millions of Germans relied on collective indifference to endure the horrors of war and ignore the brutality of Nazi rule. How much am I, how much are we taking refuge in indifference to the suffering around us? And what is the balance? Because it all comes down to balance. What is the balance around action and resting in presence? What is the balance between willful application of energy and restoring energy? No one can figure that out other than you and me in our own way. So tolerance and patience very easily can slide into indifference. Failing to react, failing to respond to suffering. On the other hand, the other side is when we respond unskillfully. When we meet anger with anger, we are simply throwing gasoline on a fire to try to put that fire out. Some of us are deeply conflict averse. I put myself in that category, and I have a tendency to put up with a huge amount before I take action. And that next action usually is to leave. So the question becomes, what's the balance for you? When you're in conflict, is it skillful to engage, or is it skillful to slow down and pause? So we have these near enemies of complacency and indifference. Another quality is disassociation, of just simply pulling away, taking refuge in the mind, taking refuge in distraction. So it's all about finding our balance in relationship to our inner world and in relationship to the outer world. And it kind of shows up in meditation. We get to see our character. For some of us, it's helpful in meditation to sit up a little bit straighter, engage a little bit more clearly into kind of deconstructing the here and now. For overstrivers, it's really helpful to relax and chill out a little bit. So I ran across this beautiful piece. I couldn't say it any better than this. In the 21st century, the world is still the samsaric world of wandering in endless cycles of death and rebirth. Even worse, it is a VUCA world, full of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, propelled by confrontations and extreme views. Any one of us who wishes to practice for the benefit of ourselves and for others may not be able to perfect the character of forbearance and patience and tolerance, and remain calm during these confrontations. Yet as practitioners, we must learn from the great teachers before us and be patient. We must be able to stay still so that we and others can truly heal. In doing so with patience, we allow the much-needed time to establish deep communication and understanding. And hopefully, we can develop deep insights that can alleviate our own suffering and those of others. I'm so struck in these practices of the power of pausing, and the power of moving from reactivity to allowing the silt in the mind to settle so that the action that comes forward is clear. And I know it's such a struggle for so many people. How do I respond to my suffering and to the suffering of the world? And I think the question becomes, are we reacting or are we responding? There is a time for us to settle and a time for us to step forward. Finding that place that feels aligned for you is your work. Let's close with a meditation where we'll just reflect on these qualities. If you like, you can close your eyes. And again, you might just slow down and deepen the breath. And allow yourself just to let your awareness open into the senses. Notice the sounds around you, the breath on the inside. Any perception of pulse or tingling or vibration. I'd like to offer just a little reflection on these qualities that we've been exploring. Just sensing the quality of generosity. And sensing the interdependence that is part of our true nature. And can you imagine, if just for a moment, of what it means to be generous and kind to yourself? Of those who have been generous to you through your life. And what it might be like to practice generosity, to anticipate what others need and to respond in a way that's both wise and kind. Reflecting on this second quality of integrity, of virtue, of your moral behavior. That when you sense what it means to be less selfish, what are the characteristics the qualities that would most move you toward what's most important in your life. What might the practices and the restraints be to help to move your attention toward that which is most important in your life? Reflecting on this quality of a renunciation, of letting go of what's holding you back. And is there a sense of what is between you and what you most want in life? If you were to let that go, if you were to let that be, what would that feel like? What would that be like? This quality of cultivating wisdom and insight, and just sensing for yourself in your own way your inner desire to see more clearly into the nature of reality. To be aligned with ultimate or perennial truth. And sensing as well on your path the importance of vigor, of vitality, of endurance, resilience, and energy. How might you build your energy to fully refresh your battery so your cup was full and overflowing? And as a complement to that sense of diligence and vigor, reflecting on this quality of patience, of tolerance, of your capacity to withstand the challenges in your life, to meet what arises with equanimity and steadiness. And you might imagine offering yourself well in your journey. Imagine if just for a moment your path filled with a sense of ease and well-being. You might imagine yourself guided forward with a stronger sense of inner guidance. And you might imagine, just before we close, that all the fruits of your practice, all the benefits that you generate through your practice might be of inestimable value to others. Imagine those in your inner circle receiving the fruit and the benefits of your practice. Imagine that the deepening sense of ease, of clarity, of wisdom and compassion might serve those you live with, those you work with. Might be a benefit to all beings in all directions. And as you're ready, you can gently deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. I'm reminded again by that wonderful teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh, who spoke about how in the times of the boat people, whenever the boat was under siege from storms or pirates, if there was one calm person in that boat, the boat would remain calm. And I think that dedication of merit is so powerful. May you be the calm one in your boat. May you be a refuge for those who are under stress and suffering. And may you be really happy. Thank you so much for your time and attention. May you have a deeply patient and tolerant and forbearance time from here. And I look forward to seeing you again.